Welcome to another episode of Exit Philosophy. I'm Griff, he's Mal, and we have a special guest today. So we're going to get going in a minute. But first, I'd just like to thank all our subscribers for their support. And if you enjoy us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, don't forget to like, share with your friends, and leave us a review. But now it's our pleasure to introduce to Exit Philosophy for a second time in his career, in his storied career. We're going to add John Gibbons.
Oh boy!
And
Look at that. Well,
Hey Griff, did you say storied career?
Storied career, yeah. Like I know how tough it is to be a manager, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, now you do, exactly.
Now I do. But we're going to get your input on a lot of things. You'll be with us for the entire hour, and we're just grateful to have you with us. And it's always a pleasure, always a privilege to have my daughter's favorite manager on the podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure being with you guys. Two of my all-time favorites. No question.
Yeah, well,
oh, boy.
Yeah,
You could do better than that, Jimmy.
Mal was there when you were there. Mal traveled a lot, and we'll get into that, the perils of traveling, and whether it's better than for team chemistry than being at home. We'll get into all that stuff. But Gibby, your last 2 years were as bench coach with the Mets and their first-time manager, Carlos Mendoza, and you visited Toronto, and it was apparent that the players really enjoyed having you in the dugout. You held court for a bunch of Toronto media, and every player that came out was giving you hugs and high fives. Now you left that scene. You left after 2 years. What did you see as in Carlos Mendoza that was different from when he took over to 2 years later when you were leaving?
Griff, first off, I was there 2 years and loved my time there, people I worked with. But Mendy, you could tell right away, he knew what he was doing. He had a great feel for baseball. He spent a few years in the Yankee dugout being the bench coach. Spent some time in the minor leagues. It's kind of rare, nowadays guys don't even spend much time in the minor leagues, a lot of them, before they get some of these big league jobs. So Mendy had that going for him. He had a real good feel for people, and in the reality of it, a major league manager shouldn't need a whole lot out of a bench coach. If you do, maybe they hired the wrong guy. You know what I mean? We're just there kind of.
They don't need a lot. Maybe they hired the right guy.
They got the right guy.
But you're just kind of a sounding board. Everybody uses their coaches differently, and I just try to act that position like when DeMarlo, I'd have things I would lean on DeMarlo for back when he was my bench coach. So, but we had a real good working relationship, and we got along very well. And I just stayed out of the way unless he needed something and let him do his thing. And normally, like anything else, it comes down to talent. You got enough talent up there. The manager sometimes can screw it up worse than he can help it.
What were the year that you worked with Ned Yost in Kansas City? Was that 2011? And then you went to San Antonio and then to the Jays?
Yeah, well, let's see. Yeah, I got whacked up there in Toronto in 2008, middle of 2008. So at 9, 10, and 11. And Ned took over in the middle of 10. And so he kept me around. Trey Hillman was originally the guy that brought me over there. He got fired, and they kept me there, and Ned came in. And that was right at the time with the Royals were starting to bring, the Hosmers, Moustakas. Those guys were just starting to come to the big leagues, They had Gordon, they had Billy Butler already there. And you could just see that the future was bright for that team, and then eventually they got some pitching. And, fate would have it, we'd meet them in 215, and they got the best of us, when I was up there in Toronto again. So, yeah, I've done that. It's a pretty good gig. I don't know. Did you have a bench coach this year with you when you were managing?
No, we had a pitching coach. They were on a budget. It was me, pitching coach, and I did it all. And we ended up 10 and 35. So Clearly, the results weren't there.
A lack of talent. That's going, GM.
Griff didn't need a bench. He
owner.
didn't need a bench coach.
No, I wouldn't listen to him
What's
anyway.
that?
And that's the thing.
No, that's right.
Yes. So and I got this new job now, and you know what? I'm kind of getting near the end anyway. And I made up my mind a couple months into the season there in New York that I was going to move on. I was trying to find a red state, man. Everywhere I turn them, I'm always in a blue state. But still can't find one.
You
so
never
now working with you never know.
You might think you were getting to a red state, and then the midterms come up, and all of a sudden you got to move on.
Yeah, they're all turning blue, Gibby.
They're all turning.
So as a former manager, and I'm even going back to Ned Yost, but Carlos Mendoza, and now you got Kurt Suzuki, who's a rookie manager. As a former manager yourself, do you ever fall into the trap of thinking, oh, this guy's got to know that, like without giving him input and then realizing that he didn't know that? I mean, do you have to consider that Kurt Suzuki's never managed before, that Carlos Mendoza had never managed before, and make sure that you give them the input that you have from your experience as a manager?
Yeah, that's a good point, Griff. The thing is, most of the time in spring training, that's when all that kind of comes. You kind of work some things out, what the manager wants, what have you, and you get his philosophy. The thing with Kurt out, with the Angels now, he was a catcher. I don't know, in the big leagues, 15 years or close to it. So how many ex-catchers end up managing, so he's got a great feel with the most important part of the game, I think, is the pitching. He already knows that. He's been back there. He's got a great judgment on that. But yeah, until you manage the game, I don't care what level it is, it is a little bit different. You got to get the feel of it. And you're just going to find out at the big league level how fast the game actually goes. That's where hopefully I can come in handy.
Hey, Gibby.
They hired Mike Maddox too, a long time, very successful pitching coach to handle the pitching. So that's going to be good. And there'll be some ex-players on that staff. So it should be a good mix, and of course, Perry Minasian, the GM out there was up there in Toronto with us. So we're hoping it's a great year.
Well, I was going to bring up Perry Minasian because I remember when you came back in 2013 season with the Jays, it stemmed from a relationship that you had developed with the assistant GM, Alex Anthopoulos, when JP Ricciardi was there. And Alex would travel on road trips and sit in your office pregame, postgame. And you developed a relationship there that held you in good stead when it came to him looking for a manager, because he knew what you could do. He had talked to you so many times in an unofficial capacity. Is that the same relationship basically that Perry had with you? I mean, from your time in Toronto, from his time in Toronto, and now he remembers when he's in Anaheim.
Yeah, it's knowing people and your connections, and everybody's got to have a sponsor, right? It's hard to get jobs if you don't know the guy. You go back to my second time I went to Toronto. Alex was there. They were just coming off, the issues with Farrell. The dream job in Boston. So he got burned a little bit by that. And so I think that's where I fell in naturally because he knew me. I don't think he knew Farrell much at all, and then that didn't work. So at least going into his second year or whatever it was, he had some familiarity, and I think that's very, very important. It's not, you don't have to have it, but I think, it does help. So the fact that Perry knew me, and I'm sure I got some good recommendations from Alex in Atlanta, they hired me out there, and I do think it's important for guys that are just starting out managing that you have guys around you that play the game, or even in my case, manage the game. Doesn't, every manager's style is different. Doesn't mean, we're going to run everything identically or even think identically, but I can maybe help keep him out of some potholes, or as we go along, or some, like I said, because the game does speed up pretty good, the big leagues.
I wanted to ask Mal about you, because you brought up John Farrell and the faux pas of his career in Toronto. when Mark Shapiro came and had his opening press conference and Mal was presiding, he said, "Yeah, I've got a lot of connections to Toronto. I know John Farrell very well." And there was a hush fell over the room. And I looked at Mal and Mal, maybe you should have warned him that this guy wasn't the most popular guy.
That's my bad. That's where it started to go all wrong.
A wonderful press secretary. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But I have the
followed
award.
by
That's right. That's right. Easy for you to say, right? With that gold cup behind you.
yeah, my shelf's empty. My shelf's empty. There's no.
Mal's got the coffee cup. You got the gold cup. I don't drink coffee out of it though.
Beer.
Gibby, you mentioned that you were getting near the end. I mean, I think you just turned 60, right? This summer, is that right?
No, I'll be 64 in June.
Oh, okay. I thought you were 65.
Just like Mal, just like he was just saying, you should have prepped Farrell and Shapiro. You should have prepped him too. There.
I always remembered 1965. I thought 65 was your birthday.
I look younger. That's probably why you thought.
Yeah. Right. But you look younger being a bench coach because you know it's not coming down on you, right?
Oh yeah. That definitely makes a big difference.
How much, like we talk about first-year managers and coaching, how long did you take off between retiring as a player and getting back in uniform on the field? Was that right away in the minor leagues?
No, let's see. Well, I got. Oh, you mean it was when I got finished as a player to get back to coaching? Yeah. No, because I was kind of I turned into a journeyman catcher in the minor leagues. So I could have found a job, AAA catchers with some small big league experience. You can always find jobs. But the Mets called me and offered me the roving catching job. This was at the end of my final season in 2000. I was with the Phillies. So I jumped on that because, I'm married with 3 kids and probably a good idea to have a job, And so that's how that started. There was no layoff. But when I got fired, getting up there in Toronto after the 18th season, a year off, and then I went into scouting with the Braves and eventually got back on the field.
It strikes me in your career that you sort of, and we've talked about this before, how you've sort of grinded your way through without really, and ended up on your feet in many situations, like when you stepped down from the Mets organization because they didn't give you a major league coaching job, then turned around and realized you didn't have any job. So you took the job with JP Ricciardi as a bullpen manager, and then you hurt your knee and you couldn't squat.
That's right.
So he made you the first base coach, and you went from first base coach to eating a sandwich at Yankee Stadium and being named manager after JP went in and fired Carlos Tosca after a day.
And choking on the sandwich after that.
So yes, it's not the normal career path of someone who ended up being a manager. And like even the press conference, and that's what I held against JP Ricciardi and Paul Godfrey, is that they didn't even invite you that day to your own opening press conference. You went downtown, met your wife, wandered around, had dinner, and they held a press conference announcing you, and that pissed me off. And I don't know whether that's a sign of disrespect or not. Do you remember that, Mal?
Just pop me back in. There you go, Griff. Sorry, I got lost for a minute. Say that again. I'm back.
Just the in New York when Gibby got hired after Carlos Tosca was fired. I mean, I wrote columns about the way that it was handled with JP and Paul Godfrey not inviting Gibby to his own press conference. Were you part of that?
No, I was not. That was a Mike Shaw special, I think. I was just before I was a part of things. I came shortly thereafter. So
yeah.
Blame Shawzy. That was his going before he took the travel job. So must have been his idea.
No, hey, no, they didn't.
How
I think
did
they
that go
might
down? Gibby, you wandered the streets?
Exactly. I think they probably didn't want me to handle the press conference like Kamala Harris would have, and that way just bring me back the day of the game, and go get them, boys. They didn't want too much. They didn't want a whole lot of word salad thrown out there because it was a tense time.
I thought maybe you left the Mets gig because they were going to have a socialist running as mayor.
Well, now I'm going to Southern California, to shine a little light on the state of California.
There you go. Maybe you can have an influence down there.
Exactly. I can pick the most expensive places to work though. Toronto's an expensive city. New York, Southern Cal.
It is.
Yeah, you should go find a condo in Laguna Beach.
There you go.
Yeah. Nice cheap place. It's only like 40 minutes from the ballpark, so it'd be great.
Yeah, no, I may.
Mal, there's a question for you. A lot of people, including Davey Johnson, couldn't believe that Gibby got a job managing. Are there people, Mal, that you've seen that you never believed would become managers and then did? Mostly catchers, I would imagine. But Terry, he's having a
volume issue.
Terry Francona for me was that guy. I never believed that Terry Francona would become a manager just because of working with him with the Expos for so many years. Are there any ones? Yeah, Gibby, are there any that you played with or worked with who became managers and I didn't see that coming?
Gosh, you'd have to think about it, but you'd look at. I think a lot of it goes back to connections. We're talking about this guy knows this guy, and a lot of guys are getting jobs that way. There's no question about it. And there's only 30 of those jobs. Maybe Davey didn't think I wasn't because I didn't drink enough back then. that 86 teamer didn't hang. But
his exact quote, "Not my John Gibbons." When you were named.
Hey, Davey, appreciate it. No, Griff, naturally, there's always going to be some people that come out of the blue and you think, gosh, how did they get that? But that's it. I think that's everything in life. But I think I'm more shocked nowadays. Well, I'm not shocked anymore, but, because it used to be you go down to the minor leagues, you cut your teeth, you pay your dues, you learn how to coach and manage, and you earn your stripes, but those days are really over. And so when guys, even I look at the guy that's got the Baltimore Orioles managing job. He's like 33 years old, and it's and I'm sure he's got I don't know his resume, but I'm sure it's a good one. But that's like unheard of, a guy that young, because he's damn near the same age as some of the other guys, and so that those kind of things I think kind of catches you off guard. But the game's changed so much, really, nothing should surprise anybody anymore, and it goes back to what we've said many times, and I said earlier, if you got talent, you should do all right unless you really screw it up. But that's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, Mal and I were talking last week about the 8 managerial vacancies and how many of them went to young or inexperienced guys. I mean, you got Tony Vitello coming from the University of Tennessee. Mal, what did we say about that, Mal?
Well, I think personally, and I don't know how you feel, Gibby, but I think something's missing when you haven't, lived in a major league clubhouse for a little while and experienced what it's like. I think your ability to connect with players is one of the most important roles as a manager. And I find it interesting that they're hiring inexperienced guys. I guess you're moving to an analytics role. Sometimes that's more important than what people view as, handling the personalities. I don't know what's your thought on that, Gibby.
Well, I mean, hey, look at the Blue Jays this year, right? You know, when you talk about, you know, everybody got along well. Everybody, you know, the best atmosphere. A lot of people and players that have been playing a long time had ever been in. So, you know, there's a part of that too. That's not X's and O's, all analytics. No, it's feeling. You know, you got the right guys that go out there every day and you know, lay it on the line, what have you. It has nothing to do a lot of times with strategy. It's just they're ready to play, and there's something special about that group. Now, naturally, strategy plays into it with, you know, pitching moves or, you know, pinch hitting, whatever. That's obvious. But there is more to it than just X's and O and analytics. Because these guys aren't robots, man. You know, they you know, if and, you know, they're human beings. That, you know, once the human element's taken out of it and doesn't matter, you know, things aren't as good. I don't think anyway. So I agree. You know, there's, you know, the days of ruling with the iron fist. You know, those days are over. Those days are long gone. So you have to function together. You got to, you know, that's why every team has a team psychologist now, psychiatrist, right? That's the reason for that.
Gibby, you've been in a lot of situations, but what do you think comes first, winning or good chemistry? I mean, it's kind of hard to have bad chemistry if you're winning, but like, which one comes first? Which one has to come first, winning or good chemistry?
The old chicken and the egg. You know, Griff, you know, I've been asked that question a few times before, you know, and back to, you're talking about Davey Johnson, the Mets. You know, I spent a couple months with him. 8 years, they won in '86, right?
Yeah.
The most dysfunctional group you'll ever be around. And they were fighting each other all the time, and you had cliques, but they came together every night, game time, to play baseball and to win, right? And then they could go, you know, it was such a unique group, but I wouldn't say it was a love fest. You know, and then, you know, you look at teams, you know, that have great chemistry and they don't win, but, you know, everybody gets along. We were kind of that way in New York this year with the Mets. It seemed like everybody got along really well, and, you know, we came up short. So I think it still comes down to talent and winning. You got to be able to win, because you don't have to get along. Yeah, it makes it everybody. That's ideal. You know, that every day you go there and there's not headaches going on or confrontation going on every which way. But in the end, talent wins, you know, and the manager's number one job is to hold it together, get the most out of the guys, regardless of what the chemistry is or the problems you might have. And that's, I think it goes back to what Mal was talking about, the pulse of the clubhouse. Yeah, that's part of the job. So I'm going to say, if you're talented and you win, things always get better and you cover a lot of problems. You know, even if you get along, sometimes that doesn't cover the lack of talent. You know what I mean?
You talked about the '86 Mets, and that's a good example. And you were part of that on a sort of periphery. But then you look at the '72 to '74 Oakland A's, and they won 3 straight World Series, and they were having clubhouse fights. They didn't get along. When Dick Williams was there, they hated Dick Williams. Of course, that's a common theme. There's a lot of teams that had Dick Williams that hated Dick Williams. Billy Martin, when he was there. Like, I don't think you can point at the Blue Jays in 2025 and say that's why they won, is because they're so close. And that's what you're saying, is that it's not necessary. It may be a byproduct. Like when you were there and you had gotten a fist fight with Ted Lilly and you got in a shouting match with Shea Hillenbrand.
There we go.
That's not, I mean, we've talked about the Ted Lilly thing. You go to the mound and he shows you up and he's like going down the tunnel and you say, "Wait for me." Is that what happened? You said, "Wait for me." And then you went down and you confronted him in the tunnel. I mean, that's not like kumbaya.
No, that's not like secret stuff. No, I didn't say anything to him, but I saw him walking down the tunnel and I went over to the tunnel instead of to my normal seat, you know. But yeah, you go back. Hey, this Blue Jays team had a ton of talent. I mean, they weren't just getting by. But, you know, what was kind of special about it, when you listen to them all, obviously, is they did get along, man. You know what? There was something that there was a closeness. and it may never be replicated again. As far as that group, or when this group breaks up down the road, whatever. So that they had the best of both worlds, but you're not getting to the World Series, on cohesiveness alone, man. You got to have talent, and they had a bunch of it, man. And it was a fun team to watch, and it was like a throwback team, a baseball team, guys putting the ball in play, great defense, great base running, all those things that the analytics world gotten away from. Let's go, see how many home runs you can hit if you strike out, no big deal, all that kind of stuff. It was kind of good old fashioned baseball, and that's what got them there. And but you throw the, one thing that a close-knit team does, it just makes it easier on the coaching staff.
Yeah, I think
the 15 coaches.
Yeah, well, that's
there's more coaches than players. My bad.
Now, I wanted to ask you, because I'm going to ask Gibby in a second about the different. And Gibby, you just mentioned it about it's tough to replicate the next year. 2015, you guys won again. In 2016, a wild card spot, and Edwin did his thing with the home run in the wild card game. But how did Mal at spring training in 2016? What changes did you see from 2015? And was there any worry in your mind? And then I'll get to Gibby. Was there any worry in your mind that this could run back again, or were there differences of attitude, differences in personnel that worried you?
Just worried about the manager. That's all.
Yeah.
He was not. He was worried about winning one of those cups that you got behind you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. No, you know what? I think the way you finished 15, I think everybody felt like that the Blue Jays were the best team in baseball. And sometimes the playoffs, it just doesn't bounce your way. So I think in 16, I think that's different than this current crop of guys. I think it was more of a veteran team, Gibby, and you felt a little stronger about what you had going into 16 and that you were going to compete. I think that's a little different. And I think one of the things with this Blue Jay team, if you may, you agree or not agree, I think the cohesiveness comes from those young, unexpected players, it's kind of that, that underdog mentality that brings a group together combined with some veterans. I think it was a different vibe in 16. I felt like that team was going to do something special in 16. I don't know about you, but.
Yeah, and naturally you come on, you're coming off a good year, and you're confident. You think, hey, you're riding high,
Yeah.
And so like this Blue Jays team, well, it was just like the Dodgers team. They won it the year before, and they were riding high. They thought they were going to win it again, and they did. Same way this Blue Jay team, they're going to go into next season feeling really good. But the beauty of it all, we didn't add much in 16 as far as players. We liked our team. But we were starting to get a little bit older, but it was a totally different year. In 15, we were pounding our offense, was pounding the baseball.
Right.
In 16 it turned into our pitching staff pretty much carried us because we had trouble scoring runs. We went down the final weekend, what have you. But then you look at this Blue Jays team now. Now they're talking. Free agent Schwarber, Tucker, those guys. And bringing Bichette back. So it's not like, okay, we're going to stay status quo. We're going to get better because we're going to add because we see what that does, So they're going to go to spring training feeling good, thinking that this is their chance to win it, and they have a team that's going to got a shot at doing that.
Gibby, in this year with the Blue Jays, it was young guys that weren't expected, and we sort of touched on that in the last part of the conversation. But you had young guys like Trey Savage came in, Ernie Clement. You had Nathan Lucas, unexpected sources of production. In 2015, who were those guys, the equivalent of those three guys for you? Stroh must have been one because Stroh was supposed to be out for the whole year.
Yeah, that's a big one. As far as position player in there, maybe Colabello.
Yeah, that's right, Chris.
We didn't expect that, and Chris ended up being one of our best hitters. Ours didn't really just take. Well, I guess there's similarities to this Blue Jays team in 15 because we saw them at the beginning of the year. We opened up in New York with them, our home opener, and I don't know when they finally started taking off. this year's team, because we didn't really take off until the trade deadline in 15, and then of course you added guy, Sanchez came up, pitched out of the bullpen, and then of course David Price, all that. This year things came together, and like you said, you Savage, unbelievable, but it wasn't like they went wire to wire, something just clicked along the way, so there's always unsung heroes or guys that you don't expect to do something. But I think the number one guy had to be Colabello. And of course, like I said, Sanchez came up. He'd been starting the minors. He became our setup man, to Osuna, and really helped us out. And of course, David Price gave us that boost. But it was like they had always said, hey, if you guys are relevant, watch what happens to this city, Toronto, and the whole country. And sure enough, it happened in 15. And so when I was watching this team this year, things started going down to the wire, and they're winning, and everything came to life really, really big. Like brought back some great memories, so it just goes to show you, and I'm sure ownership finally, say, hey, you know what, we put some money into this thing and bring in some big talented players and keep winning. This is what can happen,
You mentioned the trade deadline in 2015, and obviously that was a huge factor with Alex looking at the run differential that should have been far more victories than it showed, because you guys were pounding people when you were winning. And so he went out and made those deals, and it paid off with a run down the stretch, a remarkable run down the stretch. But my point here is that the stadium, for the first time in probably that century, came alive, and the fans were there. The fans were engaged, and it hasn't stopped until today. And you saw in the World Series and the playoffs how that crowds can factor into that, and the Rogers Center stadium, the fan base can factor in. Do you see that, like, in 2015, after the deadline, that was the beginning of this phase of Toronto Blue Jays nation?
No, I don't know, because then it hit a little bit of a lull, I mean, and then the rebuild started, after that 16. It was kind of going that way because players were starting to get older, our guys we had on the team. And then, they went through a rebuild, and I think it kind of, and I kind of think it kind of stalled a little bit naturally because you're rebuilding for the, the future. And then things fell in place, got into the playoffs a couple of times, didn't advance. And then everything just kind of came together now, so I don't think it was like in 15 it started and hasn't let up. It started, then you hit that drop off, and then the gradual excitement, and even the game's funny. Even like you said, in the 2024 season, it was a tough year up there, and then to come back like they did this year. So it goes in cycles, and some years are more special than others, and the outcomes are different, what have you. And that way, next year won't be easy, but there's no reason they shouldn't be there in the end. And but you can always predict and forecast what your team's going to do. And they go in the beginning of the season, and this team's got this percentage chance of doing this. That doesn't always work. We all know that. And,
what amazed me, Gibby, is the one thing you need to talk about playing for a country, and it wasn't until then, 15. When you realize that it was actually true. Most other Canadians, there's a kind of a disdain for Toronto, but you realize how much that team, and it carries on to today, the country, you really do play for a country. Did you ever go on, and excuse me for not remembering, did you ever go on one of those winter tours with us?
Every year.
Yeah.
I got drug out of a nice mild winter in
That's
San
right.
Antonio, Texas, into the Great White North.
Yeah.
Hoser.
I can't remember if you did how many you did with us, but it was
every year.
It was to see everybody. It was overwhelming, actually, when you went, like you were like the Beatles going into these cities. I don't know what your experience was like on those tours, but that really opened my eyes to how big this team is across the country.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed that. I can remember a quick funny story. we went to Edmonton. Was it Edmonton? There was a big military armored division out there, out Canada, and it's in the middle of the winter, right? And they were showing the tanks and stuff like that, and we got to ride in one, right? And I don't know what you call it, up the top part up there where the turret is, and you can open the hatch, right? So I don't know. There's probably about 5 or 6 tanks that went out, and so I'm sitting in one. They put the and you're sitting there driving, and Colby Rasmus is another one. We had to worry about that one. We didn't know if that was going to happen to that one. But anyway, and now they take off, man. It's in the middle of winter, man. I don't know how high the snow was, but it is. It's cold to begin with. Now you're moving out pretty good in the wind that is in your face. I have never been as cold in my life. I get out there, it's like my face is frozen, but that's one of my fondest memories. But those were unique times, and this was way out, in the middle of nowhere out there, and then of course when you go to Seattle, that turned into it was like a home game, the whole stadium, and I think Seattle's got enough issues as it is on their own now, but they were all pissed off, I guess, because all the tickets were going to Blue Jays fans that came down across the border, but yeah, it's special. And people, you hear all the time, well, the fans are the best, and this, that. It's legit when they say that about up there in Canada. It really is, because you hear it everywhere. I hear that in New York, everywhere I've been, right? In New York, though, they'll be cheering you one minute, next minute they'll be booing you, right? So, but when they say it up there, there's something to it, A lot of times guys say it just to, well, man, that's good. I would get the fans on my side, but it's legit up there. It really is.
Mal, we talked about Seattle. Gibby talked about Seattle and that experience. In the clubhouse with players, did you detect an anticipation of first-time players, first-time Blue Jays getting to Seattle? Was there talk about it and like you won't believe?
Oh yeah,
100%. I mean, guys were fired up because they heard all about it all year long, and then the sea of blue in that city. I mean, it's better than a home game. It just has a unique feel of people.
Yeah, it really does.
Because they're coming from the West Coast too, right, Gibby? It's their chance to lose their minds for a week. And you talk about, the guys bitching in Seattle, but they're publicly upset, but privately they were very happy because it sold a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah.
There's no question. It was designed around a weekend on purpose. So
I wonder how it is now. Is it the same way now that Seattle's really good? I mean, are they selling more home? I wonder how the ratio of fans, because
the playoffs was different because it was such a late arrival scenario. You couldn't really buy your tickets in advance, and they made sure that they were all. But there was a fair number of Blue Jays fans up there, but nothing like the regular season when the gate, it's like a river of blue running down to the field to get
incredible.
As soon as the gates open, it's all Blue Jay fans coming in. And I remember when I was with the Star, like it was my brilliant idea was to, because the game started at 10, deadline was 11 something, so I never got game stuff in. So my idea was to write a column about the fan situation. So I went down and stopped at all the beer platforms and had a beer. By the time I got to the press box, I was in no condition to write the column.
That might have been your best story.
I saved it till the next day. But yeah, that's a great. And you talk about the differences between rosters and whatever. But one thing that struck me, and I was going to ask earlier, is John Schneider said in the World Series that after the last game, after Game 7, he called his first clubhouse meeting of the year. And I know you weren't big on clubhouse meetings. Do you think it's like the timing of a meeting when you're about to play a crappy team, you call a meeting? I mean, you weren't big on it. What was your reason for not even considering regular clubhouse meetings with the players?
No, I just think, a lot of times you form your ideas like from guys you played for, managers you played for, as you're growing up, regardless of the level, I've always, my first go round up there, we had, probably had a handful of them over, my few years there, because we weren't playing very good. It was always directed usually at lack of effort or lack of, focus or one of those kind of things. But if you have a team that, with a bunch of gamers that got real professionals, why do you need it? And something, I've been in those meetings before where guys have had, different managers have had them, and you see guys that roll their eyes. It's like, okay, here we go, so you have to have a good feel, I think, of your group. And, it's like with your own kids. Sometimes the more you talk, the less they listen, it's just kind of human nature in a lot of ways. And you never want to be phony. Some guys, that are good at that, love doing that. Okay. They probably have more of them. But if a guy like myself or somebody else, is in there talking a lot, it's like, what the heck got into him, But if you're having a really good year and things come together, what's the use? I mean, really, do you need them? Everybody knows what's at stake,
Plus, in clubhouses these days, you got like 14 coaches. You got to give them something to do so they can go talk to players individually, almost one-on-one.
But you notice it though. You said Schneider didn't have a meeting this year, but he had a good team and you had some good veterans in there that police their own clubhouse, right?
Yeah,
that's usually what it comes down to. Back 15 and 16, we had those guys too. They would take care of things. We probably had a few more loose cannons in this team had up there this year, but they function pretty good together.
Yeah, I mean, running your own clubhouse as players relies on guys like Josh Donaldson and those guys.
Yeah, it does.
And you don't want to go in and deliver a different message than they just had, that they gave to players, and there's always that risk. But you talked about having meetings in bad situations or when things aren't going well. What was the Shea Hillenbrand, this ship is sinking? What was that meeting all about?
Gosh, let's see. We'll go back on that one. Well, I can remember at the time, Shea, he left the team because he and his wife were adopting a child. And so he went to JP for Shardy and said, give me some time. And he said, sure, glad to do it. So he was going to be gone for 3 days. I think it was 3 days. And so anyway,
it was around the All-Star break. I know it was surrounding the All-Star break.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Well, it might have been. I can't remember exactly, but
I think it was.
Then he called back and he needed another day, and so okay, perfect. He had another day, and we looked at it, or I looked at it, and said, okay, he's the guy we were facing that day. He was going to come back. He'd been gone a few days. Timing's probably going to be off. Let him come back and get into the swing of it. The guy we were facing that night, it always giving him trouble, That's back when they looked at actual stats, head-to-head stats. Now it's all projection, right? So this guy's over. Okay, well that does tell you something. So anyway, we said, all right, well, let him come in, take his ground balls, take some BP, and maybe we'll pinch hit him or whatever. So he got there, and I guess he saw the lineup card and didn't like it, kind of snapped or something. And somebody wrote on the chalkboard, "Ship is sinking," which it kind of was, but what the heck, the ship is sinking. Play for yourself, as I think it was. It came back. Everybody thought, well, Greg Zahn wrote that up there. So, okay, that's typical. And then anyway, so coach was walking through the clubhouse and he saw that and he came and told me, I said, enough's enough, man. So I just held a little team meeting. Now there's a time you got to have one, we got a little, okay, it was basically call you out. Here's your chance. I'm right here looking at you. Whatever you got for me, and of course nothing happened. It's funny how that works. And that was that. But that's one of those things. If you don't address that,
Well, Gibby, this is a personal observation from years with Montreal and in Toronto, and I had a certain fear and trepidation of adding too many former Boston Red Sox, because they had attitude about nothing's as good as that shitty little clubhouse in Fenway Park. They brought it with them. They brought it with them, that attitude, to Toronto. And you could tell, just even interviewing guys, that this was their feeling, and I didn't like it. And so I don't know if you've noticed that same attitude with former Red Sox, or if you're thinking about it now after I mentioned it.
Well, Red Sox players are kind of like the people of Boston. You know, my mom and dad are born and raised in Boston, right? And I tell everybody all the time, that's the asshole in me. You know, I got that blood in me. So naturally, even if the players aren't from Boston, it kind of trickles onto them. You know, kind of osmosis, what have you. But even in Hillenbrand, Shea's case, remember we got him in a trade, and he was our DH. You know, he didn't want to be a DH. You know, but we had Troy Glass, if I remember right. And so, you know, that was kind of a sticky point. We tried to play him as much in the field as we could. So there were some things there, you know, and because he didn't want to be, he was coming up on his free agency pretty soon, and didn't want to be labeled that, you know. And I get it, and we got along really well. And he made the All-Star team for us one year, but sometimes things just explode for whatever reason, and you got to head it off, you know. And you know, with the Lilly deal, you know, when he finally walked off the mound, he jammed the ball into my gut, right? You know, it's easy to do. Maybe he wasn't intentional, but my gut was so big that it just got. And I said, "Wait a minute, this ain't good." Because the way I grew up in my household and in athletics down here in Texas, that ain't gonna fly, man. You know what? And sometimes you got to fight fire with fire, and people don't always understand that, but sometimes you do. And you know what? Everything turned out fine. You know, and it was actually, and it's sometimes things like that. You know. Players are waiting for you to see what you're going to do. Their teammates are waiting for you to see what they're going to do, you know. And it's easy to go after the little guy. Anybody can go after that guy. But sometimes the big dogs, whoever on your team, you know, you got to, hey, it's not the way we're going to do it. And then you know, and that's not always a strategy. Sometimes it's just the right thing to do. But the other guys see it and go, wait, hey, all right, man, if superstar can't get away with it, you know, that's pretty good.
I don't know if you saw the Max Scherzer and John Schneider conference.
Oh yeah.
But my suspicion is, because everybody knows what Max is all about, my suspicion was that Schneider knew what was going to happen, because normally when he leaves, before he crosses the foul line, he's called for the next pitcher, and he didn't. So my feeling is he wanted to gauge it. He was sort of expecting this to happen. Have you ever been in a situation where you think a motivation or you know what's going to happen, and people misinterpret the entire scene of the scenario of what actually did?
No, I can't say that. I'd say if I know that's going to happen, I ain't going out there. You know?
Sending Pete out there.
No, but I mean, you can kind of anticipate Scherzer's reaction, because he was rolling, you know. And he's kind of one of their emotional, you know, leaders on the team. He's been around forever. So, you know, I don't know what the thinking is. I have a hard time believing guys strategize with those kind of things, because, you know, maybe you don't always know the outcome you're going to get, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's kind of like they say when guys go out and argue with the umpires to motivate their team. Well, maybe some guys do. I never did that, man. Mine was just frustration. I didn't want to hang around the game much longer. Got tired of watching us play too. Wanted to get out of there, but you know. So I think too much scripted stuff. I mean, there's a lot of phony stuff in that, you know.
What is your opinion on the sort of the mandated 100-pitch max for starting pitchers? It's not official, but it seems like if you're getting near 100, you're looking to the bullpen, and there's that, and just guys looking at their iPads in the dugout instead of looking at the game and the pitch.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's unbelievable, guys. You know, the first thing they do is they go grab that iPad, and I tell you, who's got the hardest jobs in the game now is umpires. It's always been a tough job. Somebody's always pissed off at you. But now that you got access to the iPads, and that's what they do. They go to see, how many did the guy is he sticking it to me, what have you, So I don't like that, But I guess it used to be you go up to the tunnel and you look on the computer. So I don't know, maybe it's better. I don't know. But as far as the 100 pitch limit, that's kind of the guideline. But I think most people are frustrated, really don't like that. But that's kind of the way these guys are geared, and it's kind of the way they program what have you. They sometimes now they start to look in the direction of the dugout. Is he coming to get me? What have you? I think they ought to change the quality start down to 4 innings now, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Even the win total. I mean, you
yeah.
need, like 5 innings, nobody does that and has a lead and they keep the lead the rest of the game because you got 3 or 4 relievers coming in. One of them's going to be having a bad day. You lose your win.
Yeah.
You got a chance for it. And I always used to believe that like the Hall of Fame starting pitchers should win at least 50% of the games they start. And it used to work out that way. But now you're looking at guys being slapped on the back for 5 innings and 3 runs, and he might get the win, but nobody wins 20. Nobody wins half their starts. And it's changed the game completely.
Oh yeah, and I don't think anybody likes it because the commissioner's office was floating that idea about you got to go 6 innings or you get penalized or something, or there's remember they were talking about that last year. But I can remember guys would go. You'd watch certain pitchers. Scott Sanderson, I think, is the one that stood out when he's pitching for the Cubs. When I was with the Mets, I think it was Sanderson. Anyway, he'd go at 5 innings if he always had to lead. He started. The guys on the Mets would look and they see him looking in the dugout, and they'd always be screaming at him, 5 and dive, right? Because he wanted to leave the game, or that was my impression. He wanted to leave the game with the lead, right? Now he's going to back when wins actually mattered. But that's out the window now. 5 and dive, it's like, and the guy might have been rolling. And he might have had 60, 70 pitches.
Yeah, Scott broke in. Scott broke in with the Expos, one of my favorites. Yep. And after that career of throwing 5 innings for the win, he became an agent. So he knows what's right.
So you saw it too then.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
but but what you said a minute ago, Griff, if when these guys come out of the game so early, and even the relievers most of the time only go 1 inning, you got 4 or 5 guys who've got to have a good outing to get the win, and those guys are used every night, and you just know they're coming, they're going down there when they see their phone rings or they see the manager walking out, they go, oh, and the guy's dealing, they're going, come on, give us a break down here for crying out loud. And I can remember it's funny. It even happened a little bit when I was managing, and it happens all the time now. And I'd kind of smirk, and I'd mention something to a couple of our coaches this year in New York. We had like a shuttle back and forth through AAA because we had guys going down and guys coming up from AAA. They all did a great job, but we had to cover some innings, if we fell behind because it was a really bad stretch. But a guy would go out there, he'd just come up from AAA, he'd throw a good inning, and he'd come in, and Mendy would say, maybe we need one more. He got one more, and they go, yeah. And then I look over at pitching coach or one of the other coaches, and the poor guy, he knows he's gone now. If he only throws 1 inning, they won't send him down. But if he throws 2 or goes into that second inning, he's out the next day because you're going to need kind of another guy that can eat some innings. And it's like you kind of see the look in those guys' eyes when somebody says something to them, they go, yeah, I got one. It's not like, yeah, give me another one. Yeah, but it's like, yeah, all right, whatever.
Mal, do you remember when Gibby was touting one of his middle relievers as the MVP in June or July because the guy would just come in and eat 3 innings and they're behind in the game? This is when they were not very good. And do you remember who that was?
Well, I remember. What I remember is when we had that crazy 18-inning game and Jenkins pitched 1 million innings and you just couldn't send him down. You didn't have the heart. Remember, Chad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that move.
What year was that? Do you remember? Anyway, I can remember. saying to the GM, we were flying to Seattle after the game.
Yeah.
Said we don't have that. Let's just bring him with us. So we went out there to Seattle for 2 days. Then we put him on a plane to fly all the way back across the country.
Thanks, Gibby. I know, but you just didn't have the heart after bailing.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's like just giving up one more extra day in the big league.
Yeah, that's right. Who are you thinking of, Griff?
Just reminds me of Boston, and Jordan Romano came up for one of those emergency, and he pitched 2 great innings, struck out 2 or 3 guys, and shut them down. And Charlie Montoya and I were out for a beer after the game, and Charlie had praised Romano, said he's a big part of our future. Like, this is great. I love that role. And then we're out for dinner, and Charlie gets a call. They're sending him down. You got to be careful.
Were you guys at a bongo club or something?
No, that was the New York Times. We staged that. He didn't really know how to play the bongos.
So some big.
Well, New York Times. No wonder that's going to be in it. That's going to be some fake news.
That's like a little jealousy there.
Yeah.
Young players coming up with the sort of the strike zone and the automatic strike zone in the minor leagues. Do you see young players coming up with more of an awareness of the actual strike zone? And you talked about umpires being screwed by technology because of the guys in the dugout. But I look at the box on TV, and you're inviting fans at home to say, well, he missed that call. He missed that call. He missed that call. And in the minor leagues with the automatic strike zone, do guys come up that you've seen that are more aware of the strike zone, young hitters?
Oh, yeah. But real quick, I've had, I don't know how many umpires that tell me, because if there's like an argument the night before or whatever at home plate the next day when you're exchanging lineup cards, the bunch of them said, hey, the box you see on TV is not the box we use. So don't get,
I've heard that.
So, yeah, have you heard that? So if that's true, well, how can that be? I mean, don't you think it ought to be the same? But I will tell you this: you can tell the younger umpires that come up that train on that stuff, that that's what they're used to. They grade out much better. I think you still get the veteran umpires that've been around. They're still going to give you a little more off the plate. But the strike zone has definitely shrunk. And even going into last season, I can remember the beginning of the season. There was an article came out and said, that they're not giving that inch or two off the edge of the plate like they were. And it was like that was a directive to the umpires, but they didn't tell anybody else that, And so what the heck? So and you could clearly see so I think that's what being old fashioned, at first I didn't like the pitch clock when I was sitting at home watching games. Now that I'm involved with it, I like it. But even this, when you can next year when they implement the the strike zone thing, I think that'll be good because spring training worked pretty good, and there's clearly the only issue I have is okay. I don't know how they're going to give like 2 or 3. I don't know what. If we can do that, maybe you ought to give more. Because what's going to happen? You got some selfish players. We've seen a few of them. They go up there maybe in the first inning, 2 outs, nobody on base. They call a ball, and the guys that think the umpires never get it right against it right, and it turns out the umpire's right, so you would lose one. And the same way with pitchers on the mound, they're still 60 feet away, so they may, you know what I mean.
Hey, Gibby, I think back in our day, they would have Frank Thomas would have took all of them.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's
But
I
I know we had fun though. We loved in spring training, when a guy would tap his hat and then you look up at the board and it was going, yeah. But so I think that'll help. But I would maybe, if you're going to go that far, you might as well give him a few more because the game moves along pretty quick, and whatever.
But if you get it right, you don't lose it. And a guy like Alejandro Kirk at spring training seemed to know exactly what was a strike and what wasn't. If you have a catcher like that who has a really good knowledge of the strike zone, do you think that adds extra value to that?
Definitely. The only problem is, that they the manager in the dugout can't ask for one, right? It's got to be,
Right.
and so it comes down to, because some players have better feel than others, and some guys are team guys, some guys are all about themselves, what have you, and so you want to make sure the right guys appeal on the play. You don't want a meaningless situation. You burn your last appeal, that doesn't matter, and then you don't have any left.
First inning, nobody on, 2 out.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the only thing. That's why I was thinking, well, maybe you get a few more. Maybe just let the catcher do it, or certain hitters. I don't know, but it'll be interesting. I think, what? The reason they're probably trying to clean up all the strike zones and all this stuff with technology is probably because of gambling in the game now. As far as the amount of gambling going, you got to make sure you get all that crap right, don't you? That's my thinking. That's my philosophy.
Some of your teams, if you were being paid for not throwing a strike on the first pitch, they'd all be millionaires.
Oh gosh! Oh, what are you gonna do?
Just one more on the coaching and the pitching, and like the number of relievers, and you mentioned it, I mentioned it earlier. The number of relievers that have to come in from the 6th through the 9th if your pitcher only goes 4 or 5. When you and Pete Walker, or you and whoever the pitching coach is, formulate a brilliant pre-game strategy for your pitchers, and then one guy fails, like, you guys look at each other and go, oh shit, now we're in trouble, because the plan that we had was perfect, like all of Trump's plans. And then
we didn't lay out the game plan before the game. We kind of have an idea, who was starting. And if we get to this area, you knew who was part of the lineup, and you knew who you had available, and it was more role type things, and so you just deal with it. I think what makes it can make it even more difficult is that 3 batter minimum, right? When you could usually, one guy only had to face one guy. If he goes out there, you can tell, gosh, he doesn't have it. Or you might be setting up for the specialist to get the lefty. You could always get somebody in there quicker. But if this guy's got to go 3 guys and he doesn't have it at all, I can remember one game. Remember Jason Grilly in 16, he had a good year, but he was getting, a lot of wear and tear on that body. We brought him into a game, and he gave up back-to-back home runs, and there was no 3 batter minimum right there. You just couldn't get anybody loose in time, and the boos were raining down. I don't know if they're raining down on him or me or both, but that's my point. You can't, this guy's got, if he goes out there, he's got to suck it up, and I think it turns the advantage a lot of ways to the offensive team, because this guy's got to be in here, and you can it kind of takes away a little bit of the strategy, or who's got control of just be the team in the field, kind of had the upper hand as far as the strategy, but
it's always been,
that I don't like. I think that I'd go back to just.
It's always been a strategy to separate your left-handed hitters in the lineup and make sure that there's no window. But now it's especially important that you're not back-to-back lefty hitters, because then the lefty comes in and he's got to face 3 guys, right?
Yeah, it's the lefty specialist is kind of gone, and a lot of the guy comes in one guy a night and gets a left-hander, and then you bring somebody else in. Because, like you said, so many of the lefties now, they got to be able to get righties out too, because the pinch hitting, or there's not lefty coming up.
I got a couple more items here, and then we're done. We're already at an hour, so let's. A Hall of Fame ballot just came out. There's 12 new names on the ballot. I want your opinion, Gibby. On I'll read off a name. You tell me whether they should survive a second round. Edwin is on the ballot for the first time.
Yeah, I put Eddie on there, man. I had Eddie, and one of my favorite people, and he had a heck of a career.
Alex Gordon, you worked with him, I think, when he was a kid in Kansas City.
Yeah, good all around baseball player, but I wouldn't put him on that. I don't see him as a Hall of Fame player, but a good role player that just an all around player. Help them big time when they beat us in 15. Help them win the World Series, but not enough impact in a lot of areas.
He was a guy everybody expected a lot more of, Gibby? Like talent wise, you're just
I think so. And he did have a great career.
Yeah.
But he's one of those guys that people always expected more.
Yeah.
Whether it's home runs or whatever.
I thought they should have sent him home on that ball fumbled on the warning track in a game against San Francisco. And that's why I wouldn't vote for him. How about, here's one more name before we get into wrapping it up, but one more name. And he had the biggest hit against you guys, Shin-Soo Choo, but the biggest hit was on a throwback to the mound. So.
Yeah, you know what? Good, solid career. I don't view him as a Hall of Famer. No, I'm not looking at these analytics numbers, the X factor, all this stuff. That they use heavily now, whatever it is. But I'm just saying what jumps out at me is like impact of the game.
The one more, Ryan Braun. He had a really good offensive stretch of 5 years, and then he had that sort of brouhaha with the medical team, and he misdirected, and there's steroid hanging over him.
Well, that's
tainted like that. Where do you stand on guys like that?
You know what? If I knew that the guys, everybody was using steroids back then. There's, come on, let's be real. Why wouldn't you? If it wasn't banned at that time, when guys were starting to do it, and my thinking has always been guys like Bonds, Clemens, whoever, even the guys that have been proven, or that there's a good chance they did it right. They don't get in because we know there's many guys that have been gotten in that were using it, right? So it's kind of like even like Pete Rose. I would put Pete Rose in there and put an asterisk on his plate, that the gambling issue, right? Because otherwise you're not going to get them all right, because a lot of guys are probably getting in because the media liked them better than, but yet they were using something. It's obvious a lot of cases. So put on their plate, well, this guy had quality, but he was involved in this era, suspected of this and that, and go. It's not all about everybody in there is not a choir boy.
Mal,
that's kind of my thing.
Mal, you got a strong opinion on the gambling aspect, not necessarily Pete Rose, but what it's doing to the game. What do you got on that? What do you think about it? I know, but I just want to hear it from you.
Well, I mean, I don't think I agree with Gibby about the steroid use, but I think the gambling thing's a different animal altogether. I think it's pretty severe what Pete did and what the rules were at the time. But I do agree, the steroid thing, it's so difficult to say who was and who wasn't. And I think the truth is, Gibby, like you're saying, more were than weren't for a little while there, and to nail certain guys to the wall, which they did. I get it for the progression of the game, but there were so many guys using. As far as the gambling thing, I think it's a different animal we're living in. We're living in a different era now with what's going on. I mean, obviously, guys like Clase and Ortiz, you got to come down hard on that. I mean, they need to be banned for good. And there's a lot of guys in the minor leagues that are getting banned or suspended for a certain amount of time. And I don't know. I think you got to draw the line there. There's an integrity part of that just you can't live with.
Well, no, I got that now. If you get caught gambling, oh yeah, you should be banned. But Pete Rose's case, I don't think he was ever convicted of betting when he was a player.
No,
he was probably always betting on his hits. Then I guess.
Yeah,
but he wasn't going in as a manager to where he could dictate some of the outcomes of the games, what have you. But he's the all-time hit king. He didn't get nailed as a player.
He did not.
And where if he had. Like Shoeless Joe or something, okay, what have you. But, it's hard to believe that you got the hit king that's not,
not recognized. Yeah.
Shame him on his plaque, I guess, or point it out on his plaque. But,
It's pretty weak. It's pretty weak reinstating him after he passed away. I can tell you that.
Oh, well, it's a hypocrisy of it all is the gambling in sports now. That were, I can remember watching the show when they came out about something about Pete Rose, and then on the same show, then they go down and they're talking about the sponsor of some betting site or something. It's like, okay, come on, okay, we got to be consistent, but we know there's so much money in sponsorships and all that. But I guess you can't really have it both ways, or can't
They're trying.
You shouldn't be able to have it both ways.
Yeah, they're trying. Yeah.
I resent being lectured on gambling by a guy like John Smoltz, who turns around and says, "Well, I'd take the over on Carlos Rodon's strikeouts today."
Exactly. We all get the point.
One more topic here. And we talked about Davey Johnson before, but what effect did it have when he passed away? Because I know that he was sort of a mentor in your coaching and managerial career.
Griff, he was a good man. I can remember when Davey spent some time. He lived in my hometown, San Antonio, down there. He went to one of the Trinity University down here too. But when Davey got into coaching the minor leagues, of course, I was coming up in the Mets system, and I can remember him coming around like instruction league and talking with me. And I was a big fan of the guy. We had that San Antonio connection. And then in 1983, back when they had the AAA World Series with the Pacific Coast League, International League, and the American Association, we had a round robin there in Louisville. And he had been managing our AAA team with the Mets, and I was in AA. And Fitzy got Mike Fitzgerald. You remember from your Expo days? He got called up to the big leagues in September, so they brought me up from AA. This is when Gooden had been called up from A-ball. This was 1983, and so Davey was managing the team the year before he got named Mets manager, 84. And so, spending time with him, and he played me in a couple of those games. And he was a big backer. I went to spring training the next year, 5 catchers up. The job was up for grab, and he played me, and I ended up winning the job. So he was a big booster of mine. And naturally, things obviously didn't work out very well. But I was always a big fan of the guy. I loved the way he ran the game. He was very, very smart baseball guy. And I liked his style. He was always ahead of the game. So, yeah, it's sad. And, in my opinion, I didn't play for many in the big leagues. He was the only guy in the big leagues. But from watching other guys, he was definitely, definitely in his time, one of the top managers in the game. And, a lot of his team, his main players, those 86 or those Mets teams in the mid 80s, they'll vouch for that, so. Yeah, I was a big fan.
Yeah, no, that's good. Maybe some of the stuff that Kurt Suzuki will be saying about you in a couple of years. So. But Gibby, we appreciate you coming on with us. Mal and I have been talking about it for a long time, and it was great. And good luck with moving to California for the summer.
Where'd my paycheck go again?
Yeah.
Well, we come to Toronto. I'm not sure. I think it's at the beginning of the year, so I will see you boys up there.
Fantastic. Right. Can't wait.
Yeah, we'll look forward to it.
Can't wait. All right, boys. Thank you.
Thanks,
I'll do it again.
Appreciate it.
And, thanks, Mal, for co-hosting, and we will talk to you next week without John Gibbons. So,
all right.
Thanks, everyone.